In 3, 2, 1.
Hi, fellas. Welcome to The Greater Good. My name's Tony.
And I'm Joe.
And this is the channel where we come up with creative ideas, thoughts, and share suggestions and advice to help people improve their lives and join in becoming part of the greater good.
Let's dive in.
For today's video, we're going to be talking about offense. And is there so many people being offended? And is there a right to be offended? When is there a right to be offended? Kind of different thoughts on that. And leading off with that question, Joe, is there a line? Like, is there some type of line of offense? And if so, where is this line? And, does it need to be like a hard line that we need to say, like, this is like, listen, if it's somebody cut you off in traffic, that needs to go. There's no reason that you should be offended, like, and take it personally versus, like someone called you a derogatory name. Like, let's like, is there a hard line to draw on this? Because, and first of all, is there an overall plethora of people walking around offended?
That's a lot of questions, but I'll take them on. No, it's good. Yeah, he's coming right out of the gate with holding no punches. It's funny because that's exactly one of the questions I had for you, but I'll tackle that one first. My answer is that first of all, it's a hard question to answer because we're all different, and what triggers us is different. You know what I mean? So for me to say, okay, this is the baseline, that's from my perspective, and it's going to be hard for somebody else to say, well, I think that this should be above the line and this should be below the line, right? I do think that in general, it's a good idea to look at your personal line rather than just reacting in an offensive way, right? For me, people can call me names, people can curse me off if they feel like I cut them off on the road, or if I had said something offhanded to them, and I'm not going to be offended, right? But that's me personally. I try not to operate from a standpoint of reaction. I understand that I'd say 90% of the time, just pulling a number out of the air, most people's offense has nothing to do with me. It's just triggered by, pre-existing or circumstances that's going on with them in their lives, right? And then I was just like the tinderbox or the straw that broke the camel's back. It's that, I could have, if I realize that I did something offensive, then I'll immediately apologize for it. And likely if somebody's trying to offend me, that means that usually it's something wrong with them and they're having a bad day, right? But if I had to say what I think a universal line of offense should be, it would have to do with things that are out of our control to do anything about as far as changing. Like once you start to insult character or, race or gender, then or just a people's history or people's culture, those are things that are or even religion. Those are things that are part of the person, who their belief system and what makes it up. And so if you're intentionally just saying stuff to be derogatory and to break people down, then yeah, I think the other person has a right to be offended. If you're criticizing, that's different, right? If you're criticizing somebody's viewpoint, or if you're reacting where you're being offended because you believe that only your way is correct, then I think that you're crossing the line there too. So I think that the line of offense lies with you personally, but I think that you should be aware of when somebody's just trying to break down your character, then you can be offended. But if you're trying to bully somebody with your beliefs by using offense, then I think then you have to be, that's not okay as well. I hope that makes sense. What about you, Tony? What are your thoughts on that? Just to throw it back at you, because I'm curious.
Yeah, it does make sense, and I think you're right on when you say, like, everyone comes from different perspective or different point of view. So, like, what offends me might not be offended to you, and there probably is no general collective offense. But also, the point where you said, like, you're really, like, if someone cuts you off in traffic, like, you never know the story, and you said, like, you shouldn't really take it as an offense personally to you. Like, if someone's doing something to you, that kind of more falls back on them, like not having a bad day, or not having a good day, and something that they're probably dealing with. But I think that in general, like, I think that people we're getting more in, like, a living in society, as there is this notion of, like, maybe, like, it's if you're in a role of the victim, or, like, you can label yourself as a victim, then you have a right to act a certain way, or a right to be offended. And so I think that is kind of being portrayed more now. I think that people are generally on edge, and maybe that's a result of hyper connectivity, like, there's a lot of busyness in general. So it's like you're kind of on edge. So it's like you're more easily offended, stressed out.
Mhm.
But I think that we can probably benefit from taking a breath here and there, and um, letting probably, like, things you off in traffic, or the grocery line or something like that. People trying to police, like, oh, you took 10, 12 items to the 10 item line. Like, how could you do that? And it's like, sometimes you were waiting in line, or sometimes you're just an
Yeah.
observer, and, like, you got to tell your friend, who, the next person you see, and then they tell their friend, or it's like, oh my goodness, can you believe that this person took 12 items to the 10 item line? It's like, the things that this, like, it don't really even affect you, you're getting offended by. So I think that
Yeah.
that's where you need to kind of draw the line. It's like, if it's something direct, like you mentioned, like, character or race, then it's probably good, reason to kind of get a little upset. I mean, offended to where it holds a grudge, I don't think it's ever a good idea. Um, Things that don't directly affect you, you kind of need to just sidestep and really reflect on it, to even have the thought, or use the breath to share the thought. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think that you walk a fine line when you talk about victimhood, right? Because
Yeah.
these are obviously people that feel victimized. They I'd say most of the time they don't feel unjustly victimized, even though if the person who they're accusing feels like they didn't wrong them. And I think that this is where we kind of get into where the line should be, in my personal opinion. Is you have to kind of unravel the message or the intent, even if it's not explicit, right? I think a lot of people might carry around implicit beliefs, or even like kind of unconscious beliefs, either from society and what we're kind of framed, like subconsciously fed, or from historical beliefs, or even beliefs that you inherit from listening to your friends or your family. And so, yeah, if somebody cuts you off in line and you're complaining to your friend that somebody cut you off or brought 10 items or instead of 12 items instead of 10, that's fine. But if you're kind of bringing in some sort of derogatory comment about that person's sex or that person's gender or race, then now, yeah, that person has a right to be offended, because you're using a malicious intent that has nothing to do with what that one individual do. You're generalizing and you're attacking that person because of your own pre-existing belief system, whether you know it or not. You're aware of it. So I think you need to be aware of intent. Which leads me to another question that I had for you, which is, do you think that victimhood is being kind of used as a weapon almost in the current era? Everybody's kind of walking around and too afraid to be, we're all supposed to be PC because we're all connected, and everybody has evidence of when somebody says something like this on Twitter, or even a video of this going viral because that person said this. So, and then people use that mishap as a banner to step up and to kind of almost destroy somebody's political career or acting career, or like athletic career, or even just even on a smaller scale, kind of destroy somebody's circle of friends or personhood ambitions. What are your thoughts on when victimhood should be aired versus when it's maybe kind of just being, now everybody's too afraid to say anything because anybody can just come out and claim something, and it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. Just the fact that it's been claimed has already done the damage, so to speak. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that you're right, man. I think that it has been like a steady increase towards this over overuse of politically correct and victimization, or whatever you want to call it, where everyone kind of walks around on eggshells because they don't want to be incorrect or not PC or offend anybody, even though it might not be, even though they're just trying to share their opinion on something, they don't want to offend somebody. It gets into a kind of a gray area where, like, can I say this? Can I do this? If one person gets offended and says another thing, and then another person, it's like, and then this kind of snowballs where you know I didn't realize I was I was offending anybody, and now the whole world's offended. And we lost Joe. Hopefully, Joe will come back.
I'm back. Can you see me? I tried to switch my
We
internet.
can't see you, but we can hear you. It's all right. It's all right. We'll roll with it. That's what we do here at the Greater Good. It's all good at the Greater Good. But yeah, I mean, it does make it really hard. And then the line keeps getting bumped, and with more things, it really creates this whole like bubble wrapped society where people don't want to do anything out of fear of offending somebody, or you know hurting somebody's feelings in a way where it's like, well, just because I have a different viewpoint on something doesn't mean I'm trying to offend you. It doesn't mean, like, it's wrong or it's right. It's just a different thought on it, and we've lived like that for thousands of years. Like, religion's a great example. Like Catholics and Jews and Muslims, like there's
The
all
Holy
different beliefs on it. That doesn't mean, like, we go around picking fights or calling people victims because they have different thoughts on something. So I think we really need to kind of reflect on that and realize that there are different opinions on things, and some we do probably like could draw a hard line on, say, like, race and sex and stuff like that. Like, that's, probably something you don't want to touch on. Um,
Yeah.
but other things where it's just like I just have a different opinion, then then it's finally, it's like it's okay, and I don't need to have 10,000 people join my side to say, oh no, this guy is right, or the opposite. Like, I don't need 10,000 people to join your side to say you're right. Like, it doesn't always need to be a right or wrong. It could always just be a different side of things. So I think that's kind of where we get caught up, and that's kind of where people get placed into this victim, where it's like, because you're want to see yourself as right, you need to take that role of victimized, like being a victim, because then more people will kind of side with you. um and when that doesn't need to be the case on a lot of the circumstances that we deal with.
Yeah.
um yeah, I mean, you're still, obviously we can still hear you, but we can't see you, Joe. So yeah, so like my question is, you know, what do you think? Like, what are some of the consequences of this continuing this everything offendedness? Like, do we have to draw a line? Can we just say, like, if you feel you're offended, then you have a right to offend it. Nobody can tell you can't be offended. Like, is there any detriment, or can people just have their own, like, right to it? Is there a way back to, like, who draws the line? Where does the line get drawn? Like, I don't know. It seems like we might be too far gone at this point, but what is there any type of, I guess, maybe solution to this issue that we're facing?
Uh yeah, magic wand. No, I think that we have to define or maybe analyze psychologically what causes offense, right? First of all, like why people feel offended. I think people feel offended when they feel like they don't have a voice, or that their rights have been trampled on, which is kind of the same thing, that their freedom or or identity has been kind of either ignored or trampled on or damaged. Then people feel offense. I think everybody's kind of looking just day by day, either individually and as a group, for validation and for a sense of identity, right? And so when we feel like we're not being validated, or even maybe offense is an act to kind of say, hey, look, here I am, this is me, I'm here. So
Yeah,
just a kind of a call to show that you have some sort of sense of importance. And I think the people who are acting from a sense of offense need to be aware of that too. You don't always have to pipe up, right? You might sometimes realize that, yeah, that person's having a bad day, like we talked about earlier. And also, it doesn't help to be always operating from a sense of victim mentality. You're kind of castrating yourself in a way. If you're always playing the victim, you're never going to grow. You're never going to get stronger. If you just kind of look for anything to be an excuse to why things are not right in the world, then you're not contributing to the solution. You're almost contributing to the problem, just by, yeah, it's good to shine a magnifying glass on where there are injustices and grievances, but it'd be better to shine it with coming with a sense, a kind of a an idea towards maybe possible solutions to that problem. I think that a lot of people think they can only see things from what they understand, right? And people who are looking from a different perspective see that differently. I love, maybe we can get it the little graphic of the two men standing on either side of a number, and one saying, that's the number 9. and the other one's saying, no, it's a 6. It's just because they're looking at it from a different way. And I think that a lot of
Yeah.
conflict and disagreements just come because people are seeing things differently. It doesn't mean either they're both right from their perspective, and we need to be aware of that.
Yeah.
And so for a solution, I think that communication is always a better choice rather than accusations, because almost when you're accusing somebody, you're saying, well, you're wrong and I'm right. And then that kind of just causes this perpetual cycle of finger pointing. It doesn't help that we're more connected now than ever, in a way, because now the whole world's a stage and everything you do is being scrutinized. And I think that there are, especially with the internet, there are, people who feel like they're social justice warriors, that they know what's right and just every way, and they feel like they need to jump in for anything that they feel is not PC. But they need to be aware that they're not. Nobody gave them a badge. Nobody deputized them to be the social justice warriors. Then we also need to be aware that there are people that realize that other people get triggered easily. We call them trolls, right? They just sit there watching. They kind of take a smoking little match and throw it onto a tinderbox and then laugh while everybody burns and gets upset about their comments. They're just doing things to rile people up because they like chaos, or because they're so insecure about their own beliefs that they have nothing better to do with the world, right? So I think if everybody took a step back, so I guess long story short, in my opinion, there's a couple ideas to reach a solution. Okay. One is to not so readily be offended, to realize that sometimes what people are saying is more to do with them than to do with you. The second thing is, when there is actual offense, or you do feel offended, the way that you act in offense, it would be a lot better to come to some sort of round table sort of element with all the parties who feel like that they are being, having injustices happening to them, and start some sort of venue of communication. Maybe they can feel comfortable to explain why they felt offended. The other person can say, I'm sorry, I didn't realize what I did offended you, or wow, actually, this has been really rough for you. And I think the third thing is to realize that, playing a victimhood or being offended could also be a sign of emotional immaturity as a person. Sometimes it takes the bigger man to just brush things off, even if it is meant to offend or to be malicious. It takes the better man to say, well, I'm just going to move on to people who are worth my time, right?
Yeah.
I think I have one more question for you, and then we can kind of do our last rounds. But my question would be, do you think it's ever possible to, for different demographics to truly understand each other? And or does, like, sometimes people think, oh, why they, like, my idea is like about, history is of people demanding reparations and stuff like that. Historically, different demographics have been treated unjustly, and that's still true today. But I think it's hard for maybe you and I to speak about that because we'll never know what it's like to be in that demographic. So what are your thoughts about understanding other people's situations, like, in their eyes, so to speak? Is it possible?
I think it's possible, but I think it's tough. I think it's like to get like a 100% true, feeling of it is is a challenge. It's possible to look at it and to view it with empathetic eyes, and it's like, anytime someone feels offended, whether it's right, wrong, and different, then approaching it with some type of like compassion is much better than fighting against it and saying, no, you're wrong, like you shouldn't be offended, or
Well, you did this, like, throwing it back at them too.
Yeah. But like, the one thing you gotta, like, when you break it down, like, everybody's at the core is a human being, so that is a shared experience that we all have, whether you have a different sex, or you different color of skin, like different origin of birth. Like everybody is a human. Everybody has a brain. Like so I think
Yeah.
that though it's impossible to know 100% exactly how the person was feeling based on their experience and what they were proven. Like you can have an empathetic approach.
Hmm.
Even if you don't agree with it, you can be empathetic. Um,
Yeah.
my thought is that it has is it's been perpetuated by social media. It's been perpetuated by regular media,
Yeah.
TV. Is this overall collectiveness is like they want to, you know, make sure that like people are staying offended. It's almost like a connection. It's like, oh, you're on
Yeah.
my side. Like, let's talk about how we're so.
Yeah.
You believe this person did that to you, said this to you, and it's like, yeah, it's so wrong. And like you said, like you see something on social media that sparks another conversation, and it's just like you're just allowing this to continue on like almost like a 24/7 basis. Like you're sitting there and you're dreaming about it. How you are offended. Wayne Dyer has this saying like you could wake up tomorrow and find 100 ways to be offended. Like
Hmm.
if you look out there, you can find 100 ways to be offended. It doesn't mean you should be though. Like
Yeah.
you can also have 100 ways to look at something differently. Um,
Yeah.
So that's my thing is that like it seems like a lot now especially political, like whoever said this, like the media puts that in there, like you
Yeah.
have to be offended, you should be offended. It's like it's a learned behavior at this point. Most of the time
Yeah.
is that you know people are seeing these things on a daily basis and realizing that they should be offended, even if they don't, they should be offended. Like it's a
Yeah.
learned behavior. And going back to your point of in the demographic, like sometimes you don't even have to be in a certain demographic or like have a certain experience that like justifies you. Like you could just be considered that in that demographic and say, well, you're not, you know, in this demographic, so you don't have it. It's like, well, neither you really. So I don't. You're closer to it, but you didn't have the same experiences. So like you're putting yourself in there, like even though you know you weren't really, you didn't go through this thing. You're just kind of like
Mm.
you know part of it based on default.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it's kind of like people can like another that was like another connection thing where people connect
Yeah.
with their prior demographic who went through bad experiences. Uh, Even though they're not going through the experience today, they share that.
Yeah.
So it's like it's just one of those things that really it's tough, man. It really is. It's to know exactly what someone is going through, what their experience, what kind of where they're coming from is a challenge. You can
Yeah.
just try to be open and be empathetic, and sometimes people come around, sometimes they just layer on the offense, but either way, it's I think you can only do your part in this.
Yeah.
What are your kind of final thoughts as we wrap up here, Joe?
I think you brought up a lot of good things about what we should be aware of. I do think that the media, and especially social media or just the internet in general, tend to sensationalize topics because that stirs emotions, and I think that you need to be aware of that. That rather than just jumping on a bandwagon, because once you start to like split ideas, it's everybody. No, everybody's unique and different, like you said, and that's an amazing thing, and we should embrace that. But I think that once you need to approach each subject, no matter how offended you are, by kind of recognizing the other person's opinion as well. And when you start commenting in or seeing other people comment in that completely disregards other people's voices and opinions and just serves to tear opinions or to silence other people, then you're contributing to the problem. So I think that if there is any solution, if there's any progress to be made, it would be to be aware of when you're contributing to kind of giving your opinion while also recognizing others, to when you're kind of just sensationalizing and silencing other people's opinions or attacking their opinions and their character, which is going to further cause rifts and make it worse and worse over time, right? So I think that if there is people who, because there are going to continue to be people that are just malicious in intent and that are offensive and that are attacking and victimizing other people, especially in the internet. But I think that in these social medias, I believe from my experiences that if we have more and more people that are empathetic and open to their other people, regardless of whether they agree or not, those people will step in to prevent the cyberbullying. And they'll say, even though I don't agree with that person, but hey, you're crossing the line. And then those people that are just being offensive for the sake of being offensive will be ostracized. And if you don't give them a voice, then they'll die out. But if you keep feeding into their attacks, then you're feeding the fire, and it's going to grow rather than diminish, right? So
yeah, yep.
Try to be aware of contributing to an ongoing dialogue versus attacking and silencing and dichotomizing would be my advice for coming towards solutions of this. Do you have any last steps? Last comments?
Yeah, funny as we were going through this, I just thought of I'm not going to give the whole story. You can, if you haven't read it, you can go read it. But Dr. Seuss's the Sneetches book. Do you remember this one, Joe?
Oh, I love this. One of my favorites. Yeah, the stars upon Mars and no stars upon Mars. Yeah.
Yeah. So he had really, like I said, you go read the book. It's kind of like a different perspective on this. Like he really has something into like how different groups place themselves and then they get offended by it or it. So it's just you got to kind of like watch out when this is all going through. But I agree with you. I agree with you that there's no like, I don't think we can come collectively and say like, here's a hard line to draw. Here's what you can be offended by. Here's what you can't be offended by. That will just, there'll be a never ending line. Like, what are we going to do? Do a vote each time? Like, hey, here's the right to things that you can be offended by and protest against. And here's other things that, you shouldn't speak about ever. Like,
yeah.
I mean, the things that you shouldn't speak about ever, that list will probably be, longer than any bill that's ever been passed in the Senate. But yeah, I agree that taking an empathetic approach, taking a compassionate approach, even yourself when you find yourself being offended or find yourself being like recognizing a offense, just being more aware of that, being more mindful of it, and trying to see a different angle and allowing yourself not to get upset or angry to a point where it's hurting you more than the person who's trying to offend you.
I think Oprah, I think it was Oprah, she had a good point about, if you're holding a grudge, then the problem is that, or if you're unwilling to forgive, then that, you're only hurting yourself, because that's something that happened to you in the past. You're holding on to something that happened, a past grievance that you cannot change, and you're only inhibiting yourself, but you're unable to forgive yourself, almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whatever happened cannot be undone. It might have been, you can learn from it, but you're only going to be, if you don't move on from it, then you're only going to continue to injure yourself, so to speak. So I think that when you feel offended, you should be aware of two things. What, sometimes it might not be so clear, sometimes it is clear, but what offended you? And then the second thing should be, what do you want from that? Right? What do you want to get from this now that it's been done? Right?
Mm-hmm.
What, is it possible to get that thing? If not, then it might be worth, yeah, it sucks that that person wronged you and did that thing wrong, but what do you want from them? Is it possible to get that? If not, then you might want to spend less time holding the grudge and just chalk it up to a really bad experience and get on with your life, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right?
Instead of getting in a cycle of like, malicious attacks back and
Yeah.
forth and hurting yourself and hurting others in your circle, like,
Yeah.
is it something
When
that
people come out and they claim that injustices were done with them, they should be prepared with like something that they expect to get back to make them feel better, and we can kind of negotiate, almost, to, so to speak, on an open stage, rather than just saying you did this and everybody is like, oh, we should be offended, and then they destroy people's lives. Right? I think communication is always the better answer. But what do you guys think, viewers? Do you have any ideas, like, when is it appropriate to be offended? Can you give us any examples of when you know somebody was inappropriate, holding down offense inappropriately or appropriately? You can type it down in the comments for us, and we'll start the dialogue. Try to obviously be respectful of other people's opinions as well.
That's it. All right. Well, until next time, friends. Same two twins. Same black hair. Same two twins. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.
Love you, bro.
Love you, man. Be good.
Yeah.